T-minus 20 seconds.
15.
Rope ignition.
10.
The igniters have been lit.
9. 8. 7. 6.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And liftoff at dawn. The dawn of Orion and a new era of American space exploration.
Okay, perfect. First of all, thank you very much, Steve, for joining me today in Space Talk. It is an absolute honor to have you as my mentor. Thank you for taking the time to talk about your out of this world experience in the space industry. I really appreciate that.
You're quite welcome.
And hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us on Space Talk. My name is Selena, and today I have the pleasure of having Steve Agid, who is the known voice of the United Launch Alliance for rocket launches. Not only is he responsible for calling out the speed, distance, altitude, and operational conditions as the rocket reports them to the ground, but has also worked on the astonishing missions such as the Hubble telescope servicing missions. Thank you once again, Steve, for being here. Can we begin by you telling us what led you to be hired at NASA? And, I'd just love to hear your story.
No problem. First of all, what a lot of people don't realize is not everybody works in the space industry works for NASA. In fact, very, very few people actually work directly for NASA. NASA hires out companies to do the work, and they do the supervisory roles. And that's what I did. The first job that I had was with the RCA company, and that was as a communications in the satellite communications business. How did I get that job? Well, it turns out one of the fellows that had that job had to leave. He was a flight controller. I don't know what they might call them in Australia, air traffic controllers that route planes. He was going back to his old job. They needed somebody with a background in orbit dynamics, which is what I had in college. Mm-hmm. And so a friend said, "Hey, Steve, this would be a great opportunity." So I came up and got that first job. For my second job, one of the people that I mentored and trained left and decided she wanted to have a baby and leave for a while. So they needed somebody that was familiar with the same types of things that I had learned over those years, and that's how I got my job back at the Space Center back in 1988. So for the next 14 years, I worked on the Space Shuttle program, and then after that, United Launch Alliance and the rocket programs. So both were recommendations of friends coming in for interviews, doing well in the interview, and then going on. And again, in all my years working in the space program from 1976 to 2016, when I was working directly, none of those years were worked directly for NASA. They were all worked for contractors that were under NASA supervision.
Okay. Oh, thank you very much for that. That's quite informative. Now, moving on. Well, what's the biggest influence on your career?
Okay, on the career and how I got started, very, very beginning was the launch of Sputnik. It occurred when I was 5 years old. And the biggest influence, again, was the fact that this was not something that was just in the movies. It was not a science fiction thing. This stuff was really happening. We were going to be going into space. And as far as influences go, I know you're probably waiting for some kind of really earth-shaking answer, but the influences are very different than you might expect. Number one, parents. But again, if you lived here in Florida and you wanted to work for the space program, that would be very normal because you probably had relatives or parents or friends or somebody knew somebody in the space program. I was in New York City. Very few people working on the space program in New York City. What was different is back in the early days when, space was just not that well thought of. I mean, nobody was thinking about space back then. My parents supported me. They said, if you want to do that, do it, which is a little unusual. Again, in Florida, that would have been a different story. You see people, do these things. In New York, it's normal to go into law or medicine or accounting or a very normal job. And this was a little bit out of the way. Teachers supported me. None of them said that's kind of a weird idea or something like that. And very important, I know, for all of your listeners, and that is who you surround yourself with. I'll come on this point, I hope, a few times. If your friends look at you and say, well, that's a crazy idea, don't do anything stupid like that. If you really want to do it, you do it. And so don't listen to naysayers, okay? If you really want to do something, you pursue it. Don't let somebody else control your career.
Absolutely. Very well said on that. So what was the most meaningful mission you worked on and why?
Okay, I get asked that question a lot, and I refuse, absolutely steadfast refuse to pin it down to one. So I'm going to refuse it for you too. I pin it down to two. Okay, I pin it down to two.
Sounds
Now,
good.
again, all of the missions that I worked were all important. There are two that stand out. And I categorize them this way. One was fulfilling emotionally, and one was fulfilling professionally.
Mm-hmm.
So professionally, the mission that was most fulfilling, that I think most warmly about, was Space Shuttle Mission STS-61. People might not recall it by that number, but they'll never forget what it was about. That was the fixing of the Hubble Space Telescope. Hubble was, there's going to be this great telescope that greatly improved our knowledge of the universe, and it was launched, and it was out of focus. So this great scientific device that was delayed for so long finally got launched, and it doesn't work properly. Being part of that team, to work with the team members in that mission, to get the mission launched, to see the repairs, and see how over the last 30 years, now Hubble was launched on April 24th of 1990. We didn't fix it till the first week in December of 1993. So 3.5 years not working the way it should have been. And then since 1993 to today, we did that fixing mission and 4 others beyond that to improve it with the amount of equipment we have on board. Completely redid the textbooks on astronomy. So to be part of that fix on the mission, that is incredibly professionally fulfilling. My degree was in space sciences, so now you're contributing to something that nobody knew about. You get to see the universe in a whole new way. So that was my professionally most fulfilling mission. Emotionally, something different. When I was in 4th grade, astronaut John Glenn was launched. The American astronaut John Glenn became the first American to go into orbit around the Earth. Well, he was quite the national hero. Well, I was assigned to Space Shuttle Mission 95. And one of the jobs I had before launch was to go into the cockpit of the orbiter and go in the cockpit. And my job that day was to verify the switches were set correctly. So 36.5 years after he flew in space, right before the next time he flew into space, I was helping to set up the cockpit for John Glenn and the crew of Shuttle Mission 95. So you look back across 36 years at this mythical hero, and 36 years later, you're involved with that mission inside the orbiter, and that was very emotionally fulfilling. The idea is that, wow, you got to be a part of that team.
That is
so
wonderful.
I hope I didn't violate your one mission only rule.
No. That was perfect.
Okay.
Thank you for that, Steve. So what do you believe made this mission successful?
Well, Hubble was successful because, again, it was an incredible national effort to do that. I mean, here you had a mirror that was not grounded correctly. A, we had to find out what was the problem. 2, you had to figure out, what are we going to do about this? Can we do something about this? Now, the good thing about Hubble is Hubble was made to be upgraded on orbit. We had a space shuttle. We had an arm that the space shuttle could use to grab Hubble. We knew that technology is going to change. Hubble wasn't going to be up there for a year or two. It was going to be up there for a decade. We knew computers were going to be better in a decade. We try to make it so you can update this vehicle. So we knew we can do something. Updating the mirror is not one of those things we planned to do. You expected to have a good mirror. Well, now you knew you couldn't do anything about that big 8-foot wide mirror. So what do? They came up with an idea called COSTAR, the Corrective Optics Space Telescope Axial Replacement. And what it did is it more or less functioned like the human eye. We cannot change the mirror. But before that light gets to the devices that are actually going to use it, we could put things that look about the size of a dentist mirror, you know, the small little mirrors about, you know, the size of a coin, in front of each of those instruments. So when the light came in perfectly to the instrument, this mirror would refocus the light, so when it got into the instrument, it was correct. And how do you do this? Because, again, this was not one of the things. We expected to take boxes out of Hubble and replace it with a new box. This was a little bit more intricate than that. And again, you couldn't do it in a laboratory. This had to be done while wearing big, bulky spacesuits. So the teams that we sent up that morning, I was on console that morning during the launch, which was on the middle of the night launch. It was a mission that was such high profile. And to me, one of the most rewarding parts about that is you always hear this debate, and it always bothers me, having been part of the human effort in space and the commercial effort in space. And you always hear man versus machine in space. The idea is, why is it man versus machine? The idea is it should not be. If you're going to the far out planets on voyages that never come back to Earth, yes, I'd suggest you use a machine. But this told you that by having someone up there, you can save the mission. And this has happened several times in our space shuttle program. Shuttle mission 37 of the Gamma Ray Observatory, an antenna got stuck. Well, in the spacewalk, they went out, rattled it, and it came out. No person, no antenna. So we rescued satellites. There's so many different things. You cannot remove that human element without making a great sacrifice. So there is a place for machines, there's a place for humans. So that, and Hubble, again, people understood Hubble. Some of these satellites are very hard for people to understand. What do we get from this? Well, it's very easy to show a picture that's not focused and a picture that is focused. You can explain to the man on the block, this is what we're trying to do. When we launch this, we want to fix this. The picture should look like this when we're done. And people could actually see it. The team commitment was outstanding on that mission because you knew you were the focus of America. The newspapers, the magazines, television, everybody made fun of Hubble. Oh, the spacecraft that can't see. So we knew we were the focus of everything, and this team just worked together supremely well.
You must be so proud of that, Steve. That's amazing.
Oh, absolutely. And again, that's why it's one of the two things. Now, again, I've worked many missions. Every one of them is great in its own way. But that one has to stand out only because it was such a national focus. Every one of the things we do in space, no matter what the missions are for, I've worked on missions that do brain research. Well, of course, that's important. I've worked on missions that explore the other planets. For example, the Magellan mission that went to Venus and the Galileo mission that went to Jupiter. Extremely important missions. And if you asked me to list 10, I would have easily given you 10 and would have asked you, how come I can't do 11? So in the end, there was 60 different missions that I worked on. And but you asked for one, so I at least got you in. I got into 2. So.
That's amazing. Thank you very much for sharing that. Now, Steve, what things surprised you the most when you entered the industry compared to university and the schooling experience?
Well, there's a bunch of things. And this is, again, one of those things that I like to talk to students about, because most students focus on a few things. They focus on grades. Oh, boy, if I just get good grades, that's what I need. And another thing that students think about is not only the grades, but the teacher was always right. Well, you have to realize a few of the things. Number one, as you mature, a couple things you're going to realize when you get into the industry, okay? Once that job interview is over, okay, and you get hired, it doesn't really matter where you went to school. It doesn't matter who your teacher was. It doesn't matter what you did on your research. They're going to look at you as if you were born that day, okay? That is the way they're going to look at you. Number one, unfortunately, the school environment in a lot of places, they'll do everything to make the world easier for you. Well, guess what? The world is not fair. You're going to have to depend on yourself a lot more, and you're going to have to learn how to work with others. You can't go to your boss and say, well, I don't like the way that so-and-so, is working with me. Try to figure it out, okay? Try to work together because people are going to be depending on you. You're going to have to develop a certain amount of inner strength, okay? You're going to have to take those responsibilities. The amount of complaining that we see a lot of interns do, well, this is just not that important of a job. I think I could do more. Or the other way around, oh, this is too hard for me. You want to make sure that if it is too difficult, tell your boss the specific things you might be struggling with, okay? And they'll give you assistance. But don't reject things out of hand. And remember one other key point, and that's why a question like this that's open-ended is such a great thing, that you don't ever want to say that, oh, well, I could do much better than that. That's such kind of a nothing job. Remember, that job has to be done. If it's not done by you, it has to be done by somebody else. So the job is important. Every job is important. Some are more glamorous. That's true. Some are more noteworthy. That's true. But every job is glamorous. I remember when we had some shuttle training, when you think of people with jobs that are kind of like at the bottom of the ladder, we showed some close-up footage of one of the shuttle launches. Well, one technician left a Coca-Cola can at the bottom of the pad, right underneath the area where the space shuttle was. Well, during the launch, the first couple seconds you see in very incredibly slow motion, the shuttle rising, and there's this little can, look, I think it was a Coca-Cola can, going up. It missed the space shuttle, but the point is, this is a task that a janitor might have missed, picking up a silly can, but it could have had an incredibly bad reaction. But the point is, every job is important. You have to understand that if you didn't get that job done, somebody else would be assigned that job, somebody that might be higher up than you. The idea, the job has to be done. Don't be a troublemaker. Don't complain about every little thing. Work things out at the lower level. In school, you can do things like that, but in the work environment, you're hired to do a job. You're going to get along with some people better than others. You can't make everybody your friend. Make no one your enemy. That's very important. Your pre-work life doesn't matter, okay? You went to this school, the other guy went to a more prestigious school. That's lovely, but nobody cares. They care about how you worked the last project. And the most important job you're going to have is the one you just haven't done yet. After the job is finished, that's in a history book somewhere. The lifetime you have to bask in your great achievement is very limited. What you did yesterday doesn't really matter. What you're doing forward is the thing that matters.
That's right. Very well said.
Okay.
I love that. Thank you very much, Steve. Now, for young university students who want to work at NASA, what would be your advice?
There's a lot. It is one of the most asked questions that I get here. The number one answer I give, and I made up a list of a lot of them, but the number one thing I say, in the United States, I'm assuming they'd have something equivalent in Australia, an internship is extremely important. That's where a student usually might be in their second, third, or fourth year of college. You get hired by an aerospace firm for the summer, maybe 2 or 3 months. Well, don't think of it as a 2 or 3 month job. Think of it as a 2 or 3 month job interview. That's how you got to look at it. It's easy to go in and wow somebody with your great interview. It's a lot harder to do that over a 3-month period when you have to go to work every day and you have good days and you have bad days and you're working with others. You can put up a false front for a job interview. It's hard to do that for months at a time. So if you look at that as a great opportunity, and it works both ways. Number one, it's great for the employer to see you work over a long period of time. And second, and what a lot of people don't realize, you can say, oh, I want to be an engineer. That's the best thing in the world. And then you're an engineer for 3 months, and it's like, wow, do I really want to do this for the rest of my life? And you might decide that this is just not for me, okay? The other reason for getting an interview, and again, that's exactly what it is, when that opportunity comes up to get a job, are you going to hire somebody with a wonderful looking resume or someone you worked with for a few months that you know? And chances are it's just so much easier to hire someone you know, even though they might have shortcomings. You know that they're prompt at coming to work, they take instructions well, they're very dedicated. You've got a known quantity in your hands rather than a piece of paper that says how great somebody is, okay? So that's very important. Second, for getting hired, when you go into the job interview, one of the things that always used to surprise me, and I've seen it done, is people come in there so happy they have their straight A average, or a 4.0 as we would call it here in the States, not realizing that a lot of other people that are coming in for the interview also have a straight A average and a 4.0 grade point average, as we would call it here. You've got to do or be something different. What makes you stand out? You know, there's 20 candidates I interviewed today. Number 13 did such and such. Wow, that's pretty interesting. Let's call that person back. What did you do differently? Some people pack their resume where I was a member of 20 different organizations. Okay, what did you do? Well, I was a member. Well, that's wonderful. You can join any club you want. It means nothing. If you were in charge of an organization, if you were the vice chair of the organization, and in that organization it did this great thing, whoa, I see a leadership skill there. I see something different. So again, we're not expecting you to have some great technical skill because, again, you're still in college. We want to see other things that you have. Again, everybody has that 4.0, or so many other people. We're not going to get the 4.0 student over a 3.9 student. If the 3.9 student has other things that we can look at, leadership skills or something that sets that person apart, that shows how dedicated they are to the task. You have to remember one other thing going into the interview, and this is one of those secret things. There's two people in the interview, you and the person interviewing you. The student goes in and, oh my God, you know, this is the most important day of my life. This could be my entire future. I say something wrong, I do something wrong, and I might be rejected, and what a terrible thing. And that's what you're going in with. That's your mindset. This day is so important. Just like in the United States, we have things like the SAT exam, where everybody takes it. Your score might depend on what college you go to. So it's just this one lifetime event all focused in these few minutes of time. You have to remember one big secret. I love telling students this. There's two people in the room. There's you and the person interviewing you. Guess what? The person interviewing you is more nervous than you are. And people say, why are they nervous? Okay, and here's the answer, and it will surprise you. Suppose you don't do well in the interview. So everything you hoped for, you didn't answer the questions right, you didn't get along with the guy. I mean, everything was just a total disaster. So you go home and you're very upset. Why? I really didn't do well at that interview. What are you going to do tomorrow? You're going to apply to the next company. Okay, so tomorrow you go to the next company and try the thing over again, and you won't make the same mistakes. Now, look at it from the other fellow's point of view. You did a good job on the interview. From that moment on, he recommended you to be hired. From that moment on, he is stuck with you. You could have given a great interview, turn out to be not the best employee. Well, that's the guy that hired her. And all of a sudden, his career, you hired a new engineer. Well, why'd you hire her? Okay. Why'd you give that guy a chance, or a couple other people that interviewed? I thought they would have been a lot better.
Mhm.
So remember, they're nervous also. So just don't go in there saying, remember, for you, it's just a question of going out tomorrow to the next company. For the person that hires you, she's going to be stuck with you. Okay. You're going to be linked. If you're a good hire, hey, you're the guy that hired her. That's just terrific. If bad, you're the guy that hired her. So the other person is nervous too. So that's important. It's somewhat comforting too.
It is,
Surround
absolutely.
yourself. Oh, absolutely. Surround yourself with positive people. Nothing can screw up your career or your goals than to have a bunch of friends that, oh yeah, you know how she is. Yeah, she still thinks she can do this, that, and the other thing. Surround yourself with other people that are as positive as you are. One of the fortunate things in my career, you're spending every day with your other coworkers that are very positive. You're working with people that are top in the industry, very, very positive. It's so hard for us to relate to the other 99% of the population of the world that are looking at everything that's wrong when we're looking at everything that can be. Some people, as Robert Kennedy once said, some people look at the way the world is and say, why? I think of things that have never been and say, why not? That's the
I love
difference. Another thing that people do, unfortunately, if you're ever put in a position about excuse making, don't make excuses. Benjamin Franklin, American from the early or mid 18th century, said, a person that is an expert at making excuses will find out he doesn't have to be good at anything else, because that's about it. If you can make excuses, you don't have to be good at anything. But the point is, there's only so many excuses. You can explain things. I could have done this if I had X, Y, and Z, but to sit around and make excuses, you can't be known as a person that just can't fulfill their task. Try to figure out what it is ahead of time, because again, strengthen your weak points. When you meet with a boss, is there something that I need to correct? Ask them. They'll be glad to tell you. When you're preparing for an interview, there are sample interview questions that are available in lots of different books. You don't want to be blindsided in any way. People will ask a lot of negative questions. What was your biggest failure in life? What was a tough situation? How'd you react to it? Because they don't think people are going to ask them questions, like that. What is your biggest failure? They're going to ask me what my greatest success was, and they want to know how you recovered from bad situations. Practice public speaking. You don't want to go in the interview with your head down. Yeah, hello. Yeah, I'm glad to be here. You don't want to do that, okay? You want to face the person, look at them, because that's the person you're going to be looking at after you get hired. Again, some of the things you can do after an interview, send a follow-up email. I enjoyed coming to the interview. If you'd like to know more about this, that, and the other thing. And it's also a great place for corrections. You asked me about my greatest achievement. I told you about X, Y, and Z, but I also did elemental P, okay? So the idea is you can, hate to say fudge, you can add some details on things that you think might help. But again, not every student is going to do a follow-up note. Hey, that's interesting. One of the 13 people we interviewed yesterday actually really is interested in this job enough to send a follow-up note. Write a cover letter on when you're sending out a resume, what we call here a blind resume. You're just sending a resume in. Write a cover letter that explains other things that are not covered in the plain old resume. Show how well you work with others. Be positive. You have to show an inner confidence, because if you show that you're confident in yourself, they'll believe that you're really being true during the interview. So those are things, that are also important. Hopefully this will give you a couple of ideas about how to approach that job interview.
No, this is all great advice. Thank you very much, Steve, for that. I think it'll be very helpful for everyone that's listening.
Great.
Getting, ready to apply at NASA and, and any other future jobs that they're looking at. So I think that's great advice for everyone. Thank you very much. It's been an absolutely great interview. Thank you, Steve, for sharing your story with me and everyone that is viewing this video, and just for motivating us to get involved and believe in the impossible. I mean, you've been involved in that, so it's quite inspiring hearing that.
Well, great. It's been fun doing this. I enjoy mentoring young people, and even we had some kids just at the Space Center the other day that were almost 7 and 8, and the father asked, "What advice do you give?" Well, at 7 and 8, the advice is, listen to your teachers, be nice, work hard, be nice. That's about as simple as you can put it to a 7 or 8-year-old that wants to, be in the space program. But I think programs such as yours, interviewing people that are in the real world, that's very important. There's book world and there's real world, and getting students involved, doing projects that involve real engineers, for example. You get to see what the real world is like, because that's the world you're going to get ready to answer. There's one thing to answer a test question, another thing to be there in the real work environment where the choice is not A, B, C, or D, but okay, how are we going to do this?
Mm-hmm.
That's very, very important. And the more you talk to younger people, such as yourself, in programs such as this, you have to remember, especially all of us that have been in the industry for decades, is to realize that everything we've ever done is in a textbook somewhere. You can read, I have books on the shelf about the Hubble repair mission. All the stuff that we've done is on a shelf somewhere, or in a locker somewhere, or in a museum somewhere. The only thing we can do from now on is to try to mold the future a little bit the way we would like it to go. And the only way we can do that is to influence some of the people that are going to help make that future. People like yourself that are going to carry on what we started. So it's your job to continue that. And that's why doing programs like this for me are very, very important. Because if you don't continue what we're doing, then everything we've done before that really doesn't matter now, does it?
Oh, thank you very much.
Well, you're quite welcome. I enjoyed this very, very much, and my best to all of your viewers.
Oh, thank you. I really appreciate it, Steve.
Okay.
Thank you for your time, and for everyone viewing, thank you very much for your support as well. Don't forget to subscribe. Thank you.
Have a good day. Bye.
You too. Bye.